You're listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Hi, today I'm speaking with Jennifer Thornton. She's a founder of consulting firm 304 Coaching, and she has over 20 years of experience as an HR professional. Currently, she is helping companies to create talent strategies by hiring, retaining, and developing their top talent. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, welcome. I'm so glad to be at the show.
Yes, thank you for being here on the podcast, Ideas and Leaders. And you are the expert to speak about leadership, about leaders. I wanted to ask you about leadership in the new normal, because now you know that you were working for quite some time with
Mhm.
leaders, but now a lot of things change. So, what does leadership in the new normal should look like, in your opinion?
I think what's interesting about the world we live in today is that it's very unpredictable. And, unpredictability and change is the way we now lead. And more than likely, will lead into the future with a lot of unpredictability. And so I think that one of the things that we've done in the past is we've held leaders accountable for very specific competencies. And those competencies, I think, are kind of out of date. And you think about, leaders should be inspiring and communicate well. And yes, they should be that. But in the world we live in today and leading in the 21st century, I think those competencies look different. Communication may not be about inspiring, it may be around helping people understand how to work through fear, because with unpredictability, we have a natural fear that comes in. And I think just the competency of, leading an unpredictable moment, that's a competency that our today leaders and our future leaders are going to need to know. Because if, we come from this place where every quarter you kind of knew what to expect. And so you could plan out, 1 and 2 and 3 years and hold people accountable to these big business plans. But that doesn't work anymore. And, yes, you have to obviously create futuristic plans, but you also have to be really ready to adapt those and change those, be able to take in new information and use that information to change the plan on the spot and then communicate why it's changing. I think decision agility is going to be really important for our future leaders, because decision agility, I don't talk about having plan A, B, and C, because that's having plan A, B, and C with the information you have in front of you. Well, in unpredictable times, we don't know what's coming at us. And so it's about making the decision that you can with information but being open to gaining more information, more knowledge, more experience. And based on that, being agile and maybe making different decisions because new information has shown itself. And I think leaders who want to stay in an environment where things feel predictive, things feel consistent, and they want to set in this place of consistency, they're going to struggle. They just are really going to struggle in where the world is going and in the fast pace that we now live in. And our pace has never slowed down. So there's no reason to think it will. And so we have to learn how to lead within that.
Yeah, so we need to be agile, we need to be flexible. And this is very interesting thing that you mentioned about helping people to overcome fear. So leaders really need to gain some new knowledge about this,
Mhm.
because we don't um, we don't learn such things,
Yes.
and we do not know how to speak with people. uh, Mostly, yeah, managers, they know how to plan, how to make SWOT analysis, and this is this is what they do. But when it comes to people skills,
Mhm.
and uh, I would say that this is what employees expect now from their leaders. So what do you think? What employees now expect from their leaders?
I think that today's workforce expects they want to be able to use their voice, and they want to be able to use their voice in a way that they're not punished. And I think 20th century leadership was very punished focused. If you speak up and you say it wrong, you get in trouble. If you speak up and the boss doesn't agree, you get in trouble. If you speak up and it doesn't go well, and because not all ideas are going to go well, then you're punished. And so, what's happened over time is we have really created an environment where people are afraid to use their voice because, using your voice and telling the truth equals being in trouble. And that obviously equals fear. And, today's leaders have to be able to create an environment where their employees can use their voice in a way that makes sense, obviously appropriate and all those things, but be giving some freedom and being able to say, I don't understand why you want it to go this direction, but change my mind. Help me see your viewpoint. Instead of saying, oh, your idea is horrible. No, we won't do it, which starts to shut down innovation and all those things. So I think, employees want to come to work, they want to make decisions, they want to contribute, they want to think, and they want to, stretch their abilities and help the organization. But today's leaders have to recognize, to allow that to happen, we may not all be perfect all day, every day. And a lot of people expect perfection in the workplace. Even though we say we don't, we do. But I think that's one of the big things is, allowing employees to come to work and use their brain and use their voice.
So we have certain leadership patterns from the past. As you said, if we do something wrong, we will be punished. And a lot of leaders right now, they started off with such managers, working with such leaders. So they have those patterns and they think maybe unconsciously that, okay, this is how I'm supposed to be as a leader. So how can we get rid of those old leadership patterns?
I love that you asked that question, because what's interesting is, when you think about the human brain, what we know about it, we've really only started to collect data and information on the human brain over the last 20 to 25 years, because science had to catch up with studying the brain, right? You can take a heart out or a lung out and you can transplant it and you can study it. You can't do that with the brain, right? So
Yeah.
it's really hard to study the brain. And so science had to catch up with it. And we're learning a lot about how the brain functions in the workplace and how it takes in conversation and how it handles stress and all of those things. But when we think about how we've been taught to lead, we were taught this 50, 60, 70 years ago, and we're still using some of those behaviors. And those directions, those best practices of how to be a leader were created without the knowledge of how does the brain actually work and how does it function in the workplace. And so I think the first thing to help leaders start to modernize the way they lead and modernize their success is they have to start understanding how the human brain works. And the brain obviously uses fear as a mechanism to stay alive, because that's the brain's only job, right? Stay alive. And so when we are in fear and we're in our primitive brain, we're actually closing down the part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that learns, comes up with new ideas, collaborates. So when leaders start to recognize that some of their habits are actually preventing people from being better, then there's some motivation, I think, to start to learn how to lead different, so that individuals are using the part of their brain that actually does produce the best work. Because fear in the primitive brain is never ever going to, produce great work. It's just not.
Yeah, so we need to start by understanding how our brain works. And when we do understand and have this consciousness, so what would be the next step, how to adopt those new patterns which are good and which things that employees currently expect.
Yeah. So it's a lot about just changing our language. And it's actually about telling the truth faster. And so, for example, old leadership of a compliment sandwich, right? You tell someone something nice, you tell something bad, and then you tell something nice. It's not great, but we've been told to do that for years. But what if you said to someone, we both recognize that the output on this project wasn't where we wanted it to be? Let's spend some time to look at how we can move forward so the next time we land this project it's correct. And again, we told the truth up front, we acknowledged it, but we took the opportunity to change the language. You're not in trouble, you are where you are, and I'm willing to move you forward. And when you're coaching an employee or you're helping an employee grow, you want them to be able to see the future, because the work in between is okay. But the old way is you missed your deadline. Why did you miss it? What did you do wrong? What happened? And that's very backwards, right? You can't change the past. But if you say, we both recognize it's wrong, what are we going to do in the future? Then that allows them to see a future tense and to grow into that. And I could go on and give a million examples. I won't do that because we only have so much time today. But it's very simple in thinking about our language, telling the truth, but then being a collaborative, inquisitive, and curious leader to help someone move past it and grow.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning this, changing the language. I was reading your series of articles on LinkedIn, Say This, Not That, really interesting about changing the language, that if you only change one word or one sentence, then the meaning, the context will be completely different. So this is what I would recommend our listeners to read the articles by Jennifer on LinkedIn. Moving forward, how do you think we can build trust in the virtual setting with our team?
Oh, it's such an important question right now. It's interesting. Based on my work history, I've actually never worked in an office in my entire career. I've always had virtual teams, and those virtual teams sometimes were localized here in the US, and then sometimes they were all around the world. I've led, international teams where everyone sat in a different country and used a different language. And, those are always, fun times as we, supported each other. I think when you go virtual, what you struggled with as a leader, you will struggle more with. What you were good at as a leader, you'll find yourself being even better at that. And so to build trust, you have to build consistency, because people need to understand when they can and can't, reach you, because they just can't drop by your office anymore, right? They just can't say, oh, you're in the office, I'm going to just go by. So consistency is incredibly important. If I know I'm talking to my boss every Monday at 3 o'clock, I can leave a list and just kind of keep that list going. I don't have to bombard and nick and pick at something. I can just hold off and know where when I'm having that conversation. But if I don't know if I'm ever when or with ever my boss is going to call or not call, then I don't have that security. I don't have that focus in my work. I think the other thing too, that to build trust in a virtual world, we have to get really clear. Why do we pay people? We pay people for results, and that is all we do, right? But in an old mentality, people thought if you're not sitting in your chair X amount of hours, you're not working. If the person who sat in the chair the most worked the most. And that's what's going to be important. And I think that's one of the biggest changes is not
Something interrupted.
I know.
Do
Well,
you hear
hopefully
me
my
okay now?
yeah, I can now. Yes. Hopefully
Yeah.
all that
Okay.
answered and then you can cut out, edit this piece
Yes.
out.
Yeah. So we can cut out this part,
Mhm.
but maybe you can repeat the last two sentences, and then we can move forward. Okay.
So, what's important is that leaders stop counting hours in the chair as performance. You know, the person who sits there the longest is the best worker, and start really focusing on results because we pay people for results. So, that's what we need to acknowledge good work looks like. And in the virtual world, that's how you build trust. You trust that I'm going to deliver on my results and that you're not, watching and making sure that my little light on my computer never goes dull because that means I'm not working, and really focusing in on results. And that builds so much trust in virtual work environments.
Yeah. And also, I know that you're speaking a lot about culture of transparency and co-creation in the workplace. How do you think how such a culture can influence team effectiveness and productivity?
Yeah. So one of the things that's important for teams is innovation. And being able to build an innovative team is definitely a competency of a future leader. Our leaders now have to do that. Our leaders in the future have to do that. But to build a culture of innovation, you have to remove the opposite of that. And the opposite of innovation is fear of rejection and judgment. If I'm not worried if someone's going to think it's a crazy idea, and I'm not worried if it's going to fail or succeed, I'm just willing to say I have an idea and we'll flesh it out. When you're able to do that, you create a ton of innovation in the workplace. But unfortunately, because, like we talked earlier, we've created this perfection mentality and every idea has to be the right idea. And everything you say has to be the correct, statement or the correct, comment. And, feelings are getting hurt because that's the boss's pet project. All of that is holding us back from innovation. And when I think about a culture of what cultures need to have today is they've got to have innovation. But again, to build innovation, you have to remove the polar opposite, and that is fear.
Yeah. So um, the, if we remove this fear and introduce the culture of innovation, why do you think it is more beneficial for organization if we focus on this other um, and not just if we not just focus on results, for example?
Right. Yeah. So when we just focus on results, eventually how we get those results will be outdated. What worked, 2 years ago to get the same result doesn't work today. And so when you focus only on results and you don't add innovation to that, then eventually you will no longer get the results you've always gotten. And so when you focus on innovation, your results will follow because people are finding ways to do things better and faster. They're finding ways to sell to your customer in a way you never thought possible. They are excited to use their brain. So they're coming up with new ideas and new ways, and they're using their voice. So they are engaged and they want to come to work. And so results will follow innovation. But in high performance, environments where it's only results but no innovation, that team will eventually start to fail because how they've got their results will not work in the next year, next 2 years, next 5 years. It will eventually fail. So I always say focus on innovation and the results will follow.
Perfect. Perfect. So what would be your advice to the business leaders who are listening to us now, and they have teams now, mostly it is virtual teams, and they need to motivate them and to, of course, to make sure that they achieve their KPIs and results. So what would you recommend to them?
So I think if you are helping teams focus on KPIs, get really clear what KPIs are important. And so oftentimes leaders will overcomplicate KPIs, and they'll have, 10 things you have to chase. But at the end of the day, there's probably only one or two in there that really drive everything. And in fact, I had this exact conversation with a client 2 weeks ago, and they were really focused on P&L results. But what was happening is the main revenue driver wasn't being focused on, and they were losing business because the team was focused on the wrong thing. And when I was talking to the CEO and COO, I'm like, tell me if this isn't happening, tell me what you talk about. And they're like, we talk about P&L, 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 and they've got to do this to make the P&L work. And I'm like, then stop talking about the P&L, talk about that. If that makes the P&L work, then that's the only thing we talk about. And so we started changing our language. Again, when you change your language, you change your results. We started changing our language that day to talk about the one KPI that really at the end of the day drove the entire P&L. And guess what? 2 weeks later, their business is up. It's not surprising. And so I think, when you are in a KPI focused environment, just whichever one or two at the end of the day truly drive your business. That's all you talk about all day, every day, and it will move the needle.
Perfect. So focus on the proper KPIs. And what else? How can we combine those two things? Talking about KPIs all the time and building the culture of trust, the culture of co-creation, the culture of innovation. How would you balance those things?
Oh, good question. I love that question. So I think that to balance those two things, you have to obviously get the clarity around the KPI, but then you have to add the innovation into that. And so if you have 10 people that are all 10 sales, maybe they're sales managers, but they're 10 different personalities. At the end of the day, everyone's focused on that one KPI, but allow people to lean into who they naturally are to get the results. So, oftentimes I talk to, so it's important for, to keep that innovation going, that we allow people to,
Jennifer, can you, because I had some breakup in connection, can you
okay.
repeat that you started with allow people to? Can you start with
Let
this
me
two
see. Who
sentences?
knows? Who knows what I said? Let's see. I'll kind of start a little earlier then. So when you have someone who is focused on KPIs, say it's a sales team, you also have to bring in innovation. And how do you combine those two? It's such a great question. And I think what's important is you allow people to do it in a way that makes sense for them. Oftentimes we tell people you have to do it exactly this way. And if you're working in a process plant, then that may be true. But in an office setting, that's probably not true. You maybe have a best practice, but let people get innovative and do it in a way that's getting the results for them, and not place your viewpoints of how it has to be done. Because again, that stifles innovation, and you never know. Someone on your team may actually figure out how to do it faster and stronger and better than you ever imagined. But you won't know that unless you allow them space to be innovative.
Yes, it sounds great.
Mhm.
But what would you say to such a manager, to such a leader who says that I don't have time to allow people to be innovative. I just need to achieve results fast. I know how to do it. Just do it
Mhm.
fast, and I know it the best. So what would you recommend to such people?
So, there are going to be environments where that might be true, but the other side of that is chances are you're going to burn and churn through people. So if you want to lead that way, then you need to know that your retention is not going to be great. Today's worker doesn't want to sit in silence, doesn't want to just do what's been told to them. And so if you want to lead that way, sometimes people make that decision, but you're going to have some plans around dealing with high turnover, dealing with burnout, dealing with fatigue and overwhelm. And so if you're too overwhelmed to change, then chances are your overwhelm will grow. And I always like to remind my clients, overwhelm is just a chemical reaction to your body telling you don't change. It's too hard. It doesn't work, because your old self doesn't like to go away. Like, it wants to stick around. And so your unconscious mind uses the feeling of what we've put the word to, overwhelm, to keep you from evolving and changing. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can either accept that and stay in overwhelm and know the problems with that, or you can say, you know what, I am overwhelmed, but I'm not going to let that chemical reaction of my brain stop me from evolving and moving outside of overwhelm.
Yeah, that's amazing
Mhm.
what you said, because I know that a lot of leaders, they want to change, but still they say, I don't have time for all of this. But eventually, mm, focusing on people is always the best decision. So, Jennifer, can you also give us a couple of examples from your articles that how can we change our language? Do you remember? Can you give our listeners a couple of tips? How can we make small changes in our language to make big impact?
So I think some of the ways we can change our language is some of those things that we're in the habit of saying. So we're in the habit of saying, great job. And absolutely, when someone does a great job, we should tell them they did a great job. But change your language and tell someone why they did a great job so that they can repeat it. So you can say, you did a great job on this report. What I liked about it is you didn't think about the immediate response. You thought futuristically, and you thought about what would this decision mean for us long term. And I appreciate that. And I want you to think like that more. And that's just a great way to start to build culture and help people understand how you want them to work. And yes, if you're busy, a great job is never, it's better to say great job than nothing. But what the best thing to do is tell someone what specifically was great about it so that they can repeat it and they can do it more often. Another thing I think that we do a lot is someone comes to us with a really, they think is a great idea, especially new employees, right? New employees have those fresh eyes and they have all these ideas, and we probably hired them and told them, tell us what you think. And then they tell us, and then they get in trouble. We say things like, oh, we've done that before, or yeah, that's not going to work here, or yeah, no, that's going to upset the CEO. Go back to your desk. And the new person's like, wow, I thought I was told to give my ideas, like I guess they really don't want to hear them. And then from day one, we've told this person, yeah, we don't want you to think. So say someone comes to you with those ideas and maybe they are wrong, and that's okay, because at least they're talking about ideas. And you may say something like, we tried that in the past, it didn't work, it's a different time, tell me why you think it would work now. And then that person's allowed to use their cognitive thoughts, allowed to walk through why it could work now. And who knows, it might work now, but you haven't shut them down or closed off their mind from thinking. You've actually engaged in that thinking. And again, you've created an environment where ideas, and collaboration of ideas is important. At the end, you might have to say, you know what, I see it from your viewpoint, but it's not going to work because of this. Go try to solve that and come back at it. And it may be a no, but it could also be a yes. But no matter what the end answer is, how we used our language encourages someone to continue to talk and to continue to bring ideas to the table and to innovate for your future success.
Yeah. Small changes in our communication can bring really huge results. I'm
Yes.
personally a huge fan of communication, and this is, I love this concept that tweaking our language a little bit, we can achieve a lot. So, thank you very much, Jennifer, for being here on the podcast, Ideas and Leaders. How can our listeners contact you?
So you can find me at our website at 304coaching.com, or you can find me at LinkedIn at Jen Thornton ACC.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.